their little hands the garden gloves. They both turned round and sort of.
Oh.
Hello, Cynical Butt here again. I'm continuing on from the brainwashing and behaviour about the BBC. And I'm going to have a little look at the BBC and Brexit. Ooh, scary stuff, Brexit, isn't it? Yeah, right. Well, I'm still trying to get my head around it. I listen to an awful lot of stuff on BBC, particularly Radio 4, of the pre-Brexit bollocks, which everyone was talking. Since the referendum, I've listened to even bigger piles of Brexit bullshit from all sides of this totally disorganised brewery trip. Granted, most of that came from Radio 4. I don't watch BBC telly because I won't buy a television licence to pay for my own indoctrination. In fact, I don't watch any television news at all. It's damaging to my health. It makes me frustrated, miserable and angry. So what's the point? Why do I need to know the official version of what's going on in the world? It's too fucking depressing. War, starvation, climate change, plagues, the list goes on. Why do I need to be told of all of this? Can I change any of it? Don't think so. Confused? Yeah, completely confused. Whether the news is from BBC, Fox, CNN, Channel 4, it's always so tenebrific. I think that just means miserable. I had to look at them with a thesaurus. Anyway, it seemed like a good word at the time. They're miserable bastards. Just fuck off and leave me alone. There's never anything uplifting or even comforting in any of these broadcasts. The best you're going to get is confused, particularly when they try to appear to be trying to present a balanced view. Most of what we receive is one-sided propaganda. My perception of the Brexit coverage was that I was being talked down to by everyone at the BBC. We were all being advised that if we knew what was good for us, we would vote to remain within the EU. The real puzzle for me is how, after receiving Auntie Beeb's advice, the British people were so determined not to do as they were told. Naughty, naughty. There seemed little doubt the pollsters had it figured out that we were going to vote to remain. Only a stupid racist xenophobe would want to leave the convenience and multicultural safety of Brussels. Well, screw you. I read that the influences of social media, Cambridge Analytica among others, are certainly the most famous of these influences, were supposed to have digitally targeted certain individuals to skew the vote. However, the people that I know who voted to leave are not at all racist. They don't hate immigrants. They don't really use social media. Most of them voted to leave primarily because they wanted to retain sovereignty or to at least delay the globalisation. It was nothing to do about immigration or refugees or any other shit like that. We don't trust government, and the bigger the government, the less trustable they become. The main benefit of leaving the EU, if we are allowed to leave, is that when things go tits up, we can hold the monarch and the Prime Minister to account, execute them and reconstitute Parliament so that it's fit for purpose. And it hasn't been that for years. It's outmoded and outdated. And does anybody feel like they have a voice at all? I know I certainly don't. No one represents my views in Parliament. To be honest, they don't represent the views of many of my friends either. Government seems to be financial exercise and nothing more. They rob and Peter, that's us, to pay Paul, the banks. Surely it should be about running more than the economy. I think we should be building gallows and guillotines right now for Theresa, for Boris, Jeremy, the DUP, Rees Moggy Woggy, and in fact all of our politicians, for the pig's ear that they've made of the whole Brexit bullshit. Not one of them seems to have behaved honourably, or with integrity, or for the benefit of the country. In fact, I don't recall hearing a single intelligent, constructive utterance from an MP since that vote. Not a sign of leadership from anyone. They're pathetic. All of our so-called politicians seem to be acting in a way which is detrimental to the UK. And the BBC is exploiting that and loving that. All the time they're just spreading doom and gloom. It must be government policy because the BBC is not independent and they do spread government policy. What we have now is Theresa May trying to limbo underneath a bar set by the EU. As she bends over backwards with her hair scraping along the ground and her crotch thrusting upwards towards Michelle Barnier's disgusted face, and she tries to jerk herself spasmodically forwards inch by inch. She never gets very forward before she fucks up and has to start again. For each successive attempt, the bar is lowered a bit more. As we all know, she's an embarrassing dancer and a worse negotiator. Or is this the point? Our politicians are demonstrating that they are completely useless. They cannot be trusted with anything. Therefore, we need to remain within the EU in the hopefully slightly more capable hands of Brussels. Surely Europe can't fuck things up as bad as Theresa, come what may. Or can they? Well, of course they can. There's not a single reason why the bureaucratic bullshitters of Brussels should be any more competent than the waffling wankers of Westminster. People are falling out with the governments right across Europe at the moment. What can we do when the EU screws up? Get a cross-channel ferry and flood into Calais like an escaping army of illegal immigrants desperate to get back home? Then perhaps we could persuade the Yellow Jackets to join us. We could march onwards towards Brussels together, the people of Europe united, as we overthrow all corrupt governments. Are there any other type of government? Anyway, who would we execute when we finally reach EU headquarters? The bureaucrats are faceless. And who can identify their local MEP? Call me old-fashioned, but I think it's essential to know whose head it is that I'm chopping off. Strange me advocating to retain sovereignty when I wouldn't even retain the sovereign. I know that's another little paradox. Deutschland, Deutschland, so good they named it twice. Who do you think you are kidding? It seems ironic that the most economically powerful country in Europe is the country which supposedly lost the First and Second World Wars. How the fuck did that happen? They even lost their finest scientists to NASA and the OSS, that's the CIA, in America. Not to mention there are other top chaps who escaped to South America. Credit to Germany, though. Didn't they do well? Wasn't one of the objectives of the Third Reich a united Europe led by Germany? Well, nearly there, lads. Crack on. How did Germany become so economically and politically powerful? Serious question. I can remember that Britain seemed to have a fairly broad-based economy before we joined the common market. There was substantial manufacturing industry. We had coal and steel industries. And the nation owned the utility companies. You know, granted, we were still living off the spoils of hundreds of years of imperialist plunder, but that was all flogged off on the cheap by Margaret Thatcher. Now our economy relies upon the financial sector and the service industries and mountains of debt. It's argued by some that we were illegally taken into the common market in 1972 by the then Prime Minister, Ted Heath. In fact, according to Vernon Coleman, Britain never actually joined the EU. I can't verify that. It just depends how you look at things, as always. But Heath has been accused by many of being a paedophile. He was the person who proposed Jimmy Savile for an OBE. I think Margaret Thatcher proposed him for a knighthood as well. So Heath obviously had a perfect pedo pedigree, making him eminently blackmailable. He was always going to be somebody's bitch, and it seemed like he was Brussels. I realise the EU in principle could be a great idea, but how can we trust the people in charge? Whose interests do they serve, and how can we hold them to account? These questions can't be answered on a national level. It's a lot more difficult to answer them on a pan-European basis. And I know the EU's not to blame for everything that's wrong. Obviously, America has wreaked havoc upon the world for 100 years or more, and with Trump as president, well, who knows how the fuck that's going to end. Yes, Britain has probably had the most pernicious effect of all, and I think it's time we started setting a better example. But that ought to be done by us finding a more intelligent, cooperative and thoughtful way of living, and a more egalitarian way of running the country, instead of squabbling over the result of that divisive referendum. Friends, families, workmates have fallen out over Brexit. I wouldn't want to fall out with anyone over that. Why can't we just have different opinions without hating each other for having them? It doesn't have to be a disaster, but it will be if we let it, and we let the powers that be divide us and rule us. By the way, don't seriously advocate the execution of royalty or politicians. Well, I do think a certain amount of torture may be appropriate for some of them. Cynical but saying thank you. Cheerio.